Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking some time, especially out of your busy schedule. You've been traveling all over the world the past year or two.
Yeah, racking up the frequent flyer miles
That's
for sure.
good.
Yeah.
You get upgraded to first class a lot now, or I guess on
No.
those international flights, it's a little different. But
Yeah, I just go further and further back in the plane actually, but that's the way it should be.
that's good. Um, what are you kind of in the middle of covering right now? Obviously, we're recording on April 30th, so the conclave starts here in a week, and we can talk about that. But what are some of the things that you're just kind of tracking right now in your everyday work?
Yeah, you're right. We're in this interregnum period, the period between the reigns of, the preceding Pope, Pope Francis, and whoever the new Pope is. So, kind of the whole, it's kind of a big deal when the whole world and not just the Catholic Church is like paying attention to the Vatican and Rome. And so obviously a lot of journalists over in the Eternal City for that. So I'm here in the States and kind of keeping, tabs on similar things. So yeah, piece is kind of looking at Pope Francis's legacy, 12-year pontificate, first Pope from the Western Hemisphere, from South America, first Jesuit Pope, really a Pope who shook things up, right, in his own way. What is that legacy, whether it's on a different issue or in the U.S., right? How will he be remembered? What impact did he have here in the Catholic Church in the U.S.? But then also looking forward, right, to who will the next Pope be? What are some of the opportunities and challenges, perhaps, that when he comes into the papacy, will have in front of him? The people electing him, the College of Cardinals, which Pope Francis kind of put his own stamp on by continuing to increase its geographic diversity. So more and more cardinal electors from Africa, from Asia. How will that impact this process, and maybe who comes out on that? So some of it's speculation, and we try not to be go too crazy with that, because the reality is nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
And there's even all these little sayings they have in Italy. Like if you go into the conclave as the Pope, you come out a cardinal,
That's
right? Right. So like nobody really knows, and people who you think are front runners oftentimes don't end up being picked. But yeah, and trying to do all of it with a kind of attitude and a posture of humility and of sort of spiritual perspective, because the church is a human institution, right? It's made up of men and women and people like you and me. You and me are part of the church, and things like politics do go into these things. We can over spiritualize something, and we can say, oh, the Holy Spirit just zaps someone and they become Pope. But at the same time, this isn't Congress. This isn't like a presidential campaign. Like, we really are talking about the mystical body of Jesus Christ, the successor of Saint Peter, and the vicar of Christ on earth. And so to approach it with that kind of perspective is important.
Yeah. What's it like working in Catholic media, not only when there is this kind of big top international story, but just kind of the climate that we're in, where there is a lot of us and them, left, right? It seems like things can get painted into these kind of boxes or camps, and
Yeah.
the very nature of journalism is to sort of rise above that, seek the truth, report the facts, etc. So how do you couch that in your work?
I mean, I think that's definitely the goal. I think another complicating factor is that I think journalism, like news, right? We call it news. And there is something about the medium that lends itself to sort of what's sensational, right? Like what's going to kind of shock people or kind of get more clicks can be a temptation. And because you want to be quick, I think there's always a danger of oversimplifying things or putting it in these, like you're saying, left, right, or us, them categories. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity and an invitation to try to bring something more, like to bring that perspective that is a little deeper, a little wider, perhaps a little more spiritual, a little more theological. I don't know if we'll get to this, but honestly, and you're not paying me to do this, right? But my education at Saint Paul Seminary has been really invaluable to my ability to cover the church, not as someone might cover Congress or something like that. But like the Synod on Synodality, for instance, that we just had. While that was going on, I was taking a course with Dr. Stevenson at the seminary on the theology of synodality, right? So when all the people of God, the sensus fidei, all these terms that are being thrown around in Rome, like where do they come from, right? Like what's their grounding in revelation and our understanding of the nature of the church, God's relationship to the church, all these kinds of things. So I was really grateful for that because I think it is easy, and I definitely fall into this from time to time, but to just be a little more flat, like a little more superficial in our, kind of like, just kind of too quickly labeling things or describing them without going deeper. And I think in Catholic journalism, we want to hopefully be informing and educating and catechizing even to some extent too. Like we have a mission that is at the service of the church, right? And so I think that's an important dimension of it. But yeah, I think you're right. It's a challenging time in the world, in the church, and I think highlighting those fundamental things that we all agree upon, and then when there are differences, not being so quick to say, well, this position here is utterly out of bounds, and only a fool or an evil person could have that, right? And instead try to understand, like, where does this different way of looking at something come from? How does someone get from point A to B and arrive at that conclusion, and what does it have to do with the conversation right now? So that's something I attempt to do.
Yeah. How do you, when you're covering things through a Catholic lens, how do you still maintain what would probably be considered more traditional journalistic standards, ethics, et cetera, of objectivity, reporting the facts, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll say is, so I work for the National Catholic Register, part of EWTN News, and my editor-in-chief right now is a guy named Shannon Mullen, who worked for a regional secular newspaper in New Jersey for 30 years, so has his chops as kind of, like a newsroom guy. And I think it's really easy to engage in what we might call the sacred skinny, like kind of gossip and intrigue. Well, an unnamed curial source said this or said that. Oh, yeah. And, our policy is to kind of not do that, right? Our policy is to say, if someone's going to comment on something, if they're going to comment on the Pope, if they're going to comment on this theological issue, it's important for them to put their name behind it. So I think that frees us up then. There might be some story happening that's very juicy and very intriguing, but the only way you can, get into it is to tap an anonymous source. And unless that's needed, right, to give them genuine protection that they might need, we stay away from that, because that's where someone can kind of lash out or say something without being responsible for their comments. So perhaps that's one way that maybe I think connects with that. And I think when you're covering the church, going to the sources, right? Like going to, we want to talk about, like, well, what does the church teach about the laity and the ordained? Well, Lumen Gentium is the Second Vatican Council's dogmatic constitution on the church, on all these questions. So being familiar with this stuff, knowing where to go and draw from when we're having these conversations or debates, stuff's already been written about it, right? Like, so
a lot of stuff.
And, it's supposed to be, we're supposed to be kind of building upon that, and it's supposed to be guiding us. So I think, and I think I love this expression that I learned from Jason Adkins at the Minnesota Catholic Conference when I worked with him, but, we want to bring light and not heat. So it's easy to go find someone who will comment on a story and will say something perhaps edgy, right? Or like maybe even a little divisive or something like that. And it might make for a spicier story, but is that kind of the most nuanced perspective to bear? Is that what will be most helpful for the reader? Yeah. So that's I think something also you're trying to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of an easy default. I feel like this has maybe happened in the last 10 to 20 years in church circles and others, where it's just kind of this, the public discourse on a certain topic is going a certain way. It's the media's fault. I'm the media this, the media that. Having worked in the industry for quite some time, I'm always a little maybe biased and quick to defend it, but it's like people we're in a capitalist economy, so there's supply and demand, right? So like people consume what they want, not just what you're putting out there. And so I feel like we've maybe in a sense done this to ourselves a little bit, where it's really easy for me to go find any Catholic publication, a Protestant publication, a news source that leans very right, a news source that leans very left, like whatever fits my own narrative. And like, I stay there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
stay
yeah.
in that lane. And I feel like the more that's happened, the more we've kind of become entrenched and encamped. And it's like, well, we've done that, and
Yeah,
every media outlet is just responding to those market conditions, right? I don't know
yeah.
if you've seen that at all, but it's been an interesting phenomenon. And sometimes the jaded part of me is like, is there even such a thing as journalism anymore, or have
That's
we kind of killed it because of our consumption?
yeah. I think there's a lot of incredible thoughts there, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it's like something that reinforces each other.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like people, like there's so much pressure to be first on something, right? Even if it means you're sloppy. And there's so much pressure to like define the narrative, to be the most edgy, to take advantage of these echo chambers that exist
Yeah.
already. And you're right that people have a choice on what they click. I mean, I am a big believer. Like I do think that I'm gonna come clean right now, right? Like I really think like technology in a perfect world where we all were like had lots of virtue and discipline and things like that. Like these, the smart. I've got mine too. Don't worry, I'm not hiding it. But like, I think great technology that
Yeah.
like everyone can use and we can use easily. There doesn't need to be any oversight and all because we'll use it well. But I think the reality is that technology is not neutral and it maps onto kind of human nature
Yeah.
in a particular way. And I'll do another SPS shout out, Father Pietro Rossotti, and the class I had as a seminarian with him, philosophical anthropology, reading Neil Postman, Entertaining Ourselves to Death, and some of these other texts, Romani Guardini's Letters from Lake Como. Like the reality is like technology and the way they build these smartphones now, they intentionally try to get lower and lower on your brainstem, right? So you have less and less control over what you're doing. Like, so maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but I think the reality, going back to what I was saying earlier about news, is that I think it can really have a tendency to take advantage of certain kind of human weaknesses. I think of Thomas Merton has a great quote in Seven Story Mountain about capitalism and maybe an excessive form of capitalism, but he basically says it creates like these artificial like twitches and desire. Like it kind of is like, think of like your Twitter algorithm. I remember I clicked on like a cat video one time on my Twitter algorithm. Next time I go back, half of the things are like cat videos or something like that, or basketball videos or, something cool. Like
Something that makes you sound cool.
yeah, I don't know. But I could do it with basketball because that's true. And like next time so it's true that we have freedom, but then it's like we're increasingly kind of like getting boxed in different ways. Maybe this is a little more beyond of the scope, but I think you're right that it creates a really vicious circle. And I don't, and I'm part of it, right? Like I work. I don't think I would read as much church news if I wasn't working in it, and I think there are real dangers that can come with reading too much church news, right? Like, I mean, it really does become. There's a danger of it becoming just like another institution, right? But at the same time, why is church news important? Like those things we were talking about earlier, the people of God, the sensus fidei, the fact that you and I are part of the church, right? Not just the bishops and the cardinals and the people electing the Pope. And the church is not a democracy, but at the same time, this healthy sense of synodality is there is like a communication between the different parts of the body. And there are different opinions on this, but I think like an informed laity can bring their concerns or their desires to their pastors, right? And meaningful reform can happen. Like we've seen that with the sex abuse crisis in the U.S. If the Boston Globe didn't have Project Searchlight and that stuff wasn't made public, where would it be with that? But even positive things, right? Like the local synod in the archdiocese that Archbishop Hebda has led, like taking the time to listen to Catholics across the archdiocese and their prayer and their discernment. Where is God inviting them? Where is God inviting their parish? Where is He inviting the archdiocese? what are we going to prioritize as we go forward? So I think a good Catholic journalism is contributing to something like that, and not contributing to just the politicization of the church, basically.
Yeah, and it's not either on the journalist side or the consumer side. It's not this zero sum game. Like, it's not either I bury my head in the sand and I go completely off the grid, or I'm consuming way too much of this information to the point where it consumes me. There's a place in the middle, right? That's healthy. It's like, no, I should be informed. I have a say in this. I am part of the church, without going too far to the extremes. And I imagine it's the same in kind of the reporting side of it too.
Yeah, and I think it's like, well, what's my vocation, right? What's my primary vocation? Like, am I a husband? Am I a father? Am I a priest? Like a pastor or woman religious? Like, and what are the immediate tasks that vocation, then what are the responsibilities that I have because of that? And if you're reading church news blogs instead of feeding your kids, you might have a problem, right? There's like something off there. So, and I think another problem we have in this day and age is that because there are all these like big battles happening, you know, whether it's in DC or in the Vatican or something like that, it's easy to think that me reading about that and having a strong opinion and maybe saying some things on Twitter is me being involved and engaged. When really that's oftentimes can come at the expense of your more immediate sphere of influence and responsibility. But there's so many temptations to kind of do that. I don't know if you were like a farmer in Sicily in 1350, if papal intrigue was too much on your radar, like a distraction from tilling the soil and feeding your family and all that stuff you got to do.
Yeah, healthy distance is definitely a real thing. I think there's that. You mentioned the need in your work to be first. I think there's some of that on the consumer side too. Like, I have to have an opinion on this. Like, I have to have a take. And now, because we all have a platform, if we want to, on X or Facebook or Insta or wherever you're spending your time, like, I can share that take, right? And it's like, I look at Pope Francis as a perfect example. The man died less than 2 weeks ago. It could be decades before we really understand his full legacy, and that's okay. Like wait, we can reflect in the moment that we're in now, but you don't have to form your opinion mere seconds after you're informed of a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, again, I mean, something like the seminary, right, or kind of place where you're doing theology, like, it's not that you're cut off from any of this stuff happening in the life of the church, but you have like this posture and this privilege, really, like an opportunity to kind of like, let's slow down and think more deeply. And I mean, that's why I love interviewing theologians, like, for my stories, is because they might take a day or two to get back to you. They're not some pundit, right, who's just ready to kind of say, this is what that means, that's what that means. But they provide something more, something a little more far-reaching and more deeply connected to the sources. But can I share a story on related to that? Or
yes, please.
Okay. So I was in seminary, right, for 3 years, and I left formation end of 2020. And then I got into journalism because I'd done some work with the Register before. And in 2021, that November, I went to the Bishops' Conference in Baltimore. And they were electing a new president of the Bishops' Conference. And there was a front runner, Archbishop Timothy Broglio, who's the Archbishop of Military Services in the United States. And, I remember that it was anticipated that he would be elected. And I remember, I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but like a certain set of journalists there were just kind of ready to go and ready to set the narrative. And the second it was announced that he was elected, one of the websites publishes anti-Francis Archbishop elected, president of the USCCB.
There's plenty of meaty keywords in that.
Yeah. But it was a real like eye-opening moment for me. Like, I'm, was a seminarian. I love theology and stuff like that. But about like how journalism is often not just reporting facts, but is presenting a narrative, right? And like there could the reality is that we need narratives, right? Like the way we live our lives, we have a story about ourselves, right? We have a story about the world, our place in it, all this kind of stuff. And like, it's not just disembodied facts floating around. And it can be helpful to put that in perspective for someone. But it underscored to me like the sort of the power and the responsibility, the power of the pen, right? Like that you have. And I remember going late after that, I was on some trip in Israel with other Catholic journalists from different parts of the world, and including one from Spain. And I remember her telling me, is this true about the new president of the USCCB, that he's like this? And I'm like, whoa, like that gets out. And
Yeah.
So I think that, like there's a great responsibility to take that seriously, to take seriously that what you write is going to shape other people's view of reality. And there's a philosophy professor at St. Thomas who would always say that, we don't take lying seriously enough. And I'm not saying these other journalists are lying necessarily, but I'm just saying in general, we don't take lying seriously enough. Like, because when you lie, other people depend upon you, and we depend upon other people to help us make sense of what's going on and then to make decisions in our own lives. And so lying is like, even if it's a little lie, is distorting someone else's understanding of reality. And I think, that's like, I think to be mindful of that in every word you write and every story you publish, to ask the question, is this true? Is it fair? Is it honest? Is it helpful? Is it important?
How would you just kind of summarize the time we're in as a church right now, whether it's looking back at Francis's pontificate here again very early after its end, but then also as we move into the future, what we can look forward to and just kind of where things are at. It's an interesting time right now. It's probably putting it very mildly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was thinking about Pope Francis lately, and I think John Henry Newman, he canonized John Henry Newman in 2019, but also John Henry Newman, his motto is cor ad cor loquitur, heart speaks to heart. And John Henry Newman, for this, highfalutin scholar that he was, he really focused on the person and the person's ability to impact someone else. And that was threaded through, grammar of assent, idea of a universe, like kind of all his works. That was like a theme throughout it. And he's got this quote where he says, persons influence us, deeds move us, voices melt us, right? Like that it's the person, not some disembodied idea that usually is actually convicting us to do something. And I think like Francis really embodied that. Like, what do people, the average Catholic or even non-Catholic, what do they remember from Pope Francis? What was the impact he had on them? It was him embracing a disfigured man in St. Peter's Square. It was him consoling a boy whose father was an atheist and had passed away. Even the little acts he did, not living in the Apostolic Palace, but living in Casa Santa Marta in the Vatican, those have an incredible impact, right, on people. And it's really kind of a good reminder, especially for those of us who tend towards the abstract a little bit more and love the academic stuff, which is good. And they're all interconnected, right? They're not opposed to each other, but that living a Christian love, right, is what impacts people. And of course, this isn't, a new idea with Francis, right? I mean, even his predecessor, Pope Benedict, said, Christianity is not the product of a lofty idea or an ethical choice, but it's an encounter with a person, right, with an event, with Christ. And so I think Francis, his emphasis on going out to the peripheries, on the margins, on mercy, I think was a welcome reminder and an inspiration for so many of us to do that. And I think he shook things up. Like, I think his understanding was that the church is maybe a little too self-referential at times. It's a little navel-gazing and things like that. And, it's about the encounter with Christ. So anything that gets in the way of that, like, we should go around it or remove it. And so really, I think Francis, he was also a pope that started a lot of processes, but didn't make a lot of final decisions. Yeah. So everything from the Synod on Synodality, right? Like this multi-year process, which is moving towards a possible reform of church governance. There's a lot of that could go a lot of different ways. Like the Synod on Synodality, there are a lot of
closed on that.
Yeah, and it can really, it could have there are different understandings of a term like synodality, right? And so therefore, what its potential impact even on the church discerns doctrinal development. Like there's a lot of unanswered questions there. issues related to female diaconate. What does that mean exactly? Is that a possibility? Like he convened 2 study committees on that topic, never made any kind of final decision. So he kind of like started up a lot of things, and I think it's fair to say many things that some people thought were kind of settled under JP2 and Benedict XVI. And so it was kind of like a reset, kind of a shakeup, and so that's the moment we're in right now. We're in a moment where you kind of feel like you're, I don't know if cliffhanger is the right word, or you're like in between a breath, right? Because really, whatever Pope Francis's legacy is will, I think, in many ways be determined by who comes after him, right? Is it going to be like, what direction will the next Pope take the church, and specifically take these initiatives that Pope Francis began? So I think that's where we're at. I mean, I do think that there is a climate, whatever theological persuasion, that's not the right word, but kind of your perspective, right? And there are some exceptions to this too. But I think, after a pope who is very provocative in many ways, and is kind of like pricking your conscience a little bit, and like saying, hey, like, get out there, like, don't just sit around. Like, it's natural to think that there is probably like a desire for stability, for kind of like, okay, so, I mean, even the way Francis governed in the Vatican, possibly because of concerns with corruption in the Curia, but really circumvented a lot of the normal kinds of checks and balances or protocols and things like that. And so, after kind of getting shaken up, it's like maybe we need some kind of stability, calm, unity. I think Francis was so focused on his actions, right? Like conveying part of his teaching, right, through, and Christ, right? We read in Dei Verbum, also from Vatican II, that Christ revealed God through his words and his deeds, right? Like, so the revelation is communicated not just in words, but also in actions. And Francis was communicating his teaching through what he did. But I think it's fair to say that clarity in doctrine also might be the order of the day, or what people are looking for. So anyway, that's maybe a sense of kind of where we're at, and what we're waiting to see with the next pope.
Yeah, and at the same time, to some of your earlier points in this conversation, it's good to be informed. It's good to know the facts and report on the facts as you do in your line of work. But it's also, I think, a good time to remember that Jesus runs his church, right? And I also think in your work and others, it's an opportunity to highlight that too, right? Like the Pope is the leader on earth of the church. He's Christ's vicar on earth. He's successor to St. Peter, but he's not Jesus. There's opportunities to sort of maybe clarify that too, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is an interesting thing, because during Pope Francis's pontificate, you had some people who during John Paul II or Benedict XVI were like, you need to, like, every word that the Pope says is kind of the word of God.
Yeah.
We're all of a sudden saying, hold on a second, like maybe this rock star papacy thing like isn't actually the way to go about it. Like, sure. Ultramontanism, this idea that ultra meaning beyond the mountain. So in Rome, whatever, the Pope says about what you should have for breakfast or something like that. I want that. I need to know like what that is, or, what I should buy at the grocery store. But maybe that's, I think a lot of theologians will say, well, that's kind of a sort of heightened view of papal authority that is more recent in the church's history. And who knows, at the same time, we live in a global church, right? A very interconnected world. And so what happens in one part of the world, like Germany, for instance, like could affect what's happening in another part of the world. So having a pope, I think, who is that sort of visible bond of unity, right, for the various local churches throughout the world, but like who is someone who can be that arbiter, and at the end of the day say, no, this is what the faith is, and this is what can be applied differently, or different customs or practices, but this is what the core, right, the heart of it is, and we all need to be moving forward together like this, I think is, but to your point about, on a point, a pope who ultimately refers people to Christ, and, is a bridge, a pontiff, right, to him, yeah. So I don't know if they'll elect like the most boring guy possible because they're like, we've had too much.
There's too much excitement in the world right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Or he'll stop flying around the world. We'll go to Pope who just stays in the Vatican the whole time. I don't know if we'll go that far, but
Yeah.
but we'll see.
Yeah, we will. Well, we could, and many are, devote an entire podcast days worth of recording podcast to the Pope, but lots of other cool stuff to talk about, and appreciate you sharing your insight on that. It's a good segue when you talk about other local churches around the world, because we mentioned your travels. You went to Africa, Germany, and kind of did sort of some deep dives right on something along the lines of what is the Catholic life like in these places that are maybe very different from our home bases here in the U.S. Were those the two main trips you took? And maybe just share some about those and what your takeaways were.
Yeah, absolutely. Where to begin? I mean, so Germany, I went in 2023 in March. There's been something happening in Germany called the German Synodal Way, so different from the Synod on Synodality.
Could we play a drinking game every time you tweet or write the word synod, do you think? Or some root, offshoot there?
Yeah, I don't know if my writing would be very clear after that. Go a little sideways pretty quickly. But a lot of synodality in the air. That's kind of the buzzword right now, for sure. But the church in Germany is really interesting to a lot of Catholics in other parts of the world. Why? Because the church in Germany is very wealthy. They have this thing called the Kirchensteuer, which means my German pronunciation is really bad.
It sounded pretty good.
Other Kyle Etzel, if he's out there, an SPS alum, he'll get on my case.
He sat in that very chair before.
Wow!
So, yeah,
what an honor.
Royalty, yeah.
But a church tax, because the German solution to conflict between Protestants and Catholics was to say, okay, we're not going to do a state-sponsored church anymore. We're just going to say, if you're a member of a church, we'll basically tax you. We'll take some of your income and we'll go towards that church. So over time, the German church has a lot of wealth. I think it's fair to say that the church in Germany is also perhaps the most, or one of the most sort of theologically liberal churches. But it has this extraordinary influence, right, on other parts of the world. So I went there to look into that synod on synodality, or excuse me, not the synod on synodality, the synodal way, but then also to see what's Catholic life like in Germany, and to discover little signs of hope. And so that, like going to a place like Berlin after World War II was like flattened, right? And so it's grown from that to be this really gritty, like post-communist, like very eclectic and edgy kind of, a lot of artists there, lots of things like that. And like a really inspiring, compelling, rough around the edges, like Catholic scene there too. That's like engaging in that kind of thing. Really inspiring to see people who don't have perhaps as many of the resources or the numbers or the apostolates like that we do in the Twin Cities here, the Archdiocese of Saint Paul and Minneapolis, or a place like Bavaria, which historically, people there thought they were more Catholic than the Pope at times, right? And like to see though how they're now, like the new evangelization, which John Paul II talked about, was like a dirty word in Munich, right? Because they're like, what do we need to be evangelized for? But to see how there are attempts by some bishops in places like Passau, Germany, Stephen Oster, to kind of like get beyond just the cultural Catholicism that's present in a place like that, where less than 5% of people go to Mass on Sunday, and try to create opportunities for that encounter with Christ, right? Focus missionaries over playing a leading role in Germany and places like that. So that, I mean, it was just inspiring in that way. Like, I think a lot of people think the Catholic Church in Germany is like a lost cause or bad news.
Yeah.
So I think it was a privilege to get to know and cover and report on like what I think many people would think are kind of signs of hope.
Sure.
And then a different kind of on the other end of the spectrum.
The Catholic Church is dying in Germany, and in Africa. If we were all more like Africa, the world we'd have it made, right? That's stigma.
Definitely exploding there. It's almost like their problems are they have too many seminarians, right? Like they don't have enough room.
Yeah.
They don't have enough priests even to be like the ratio at SPS is probably a formator to seminarian is probably it's under 1 to 10, I think.
Yeah, it's a right around there, I would say.
Some places in Africa it's like 1 to 40. or
It's
50.
crazy.
Yeah, and that presents its own problems and
Yeah,
challenges. But
sure.
but yeah, so I went on a trip this past summer, it was about a year ago, and because I was sitting there and I'm like, we always talk about how the church in Africa is the future, and I feel like African Catholics are kind of referenced whenever there's like a dispute in the West, maybe about sexual morality or something like that. And perhaps more conservative Catholics will say, well, look what, the African Catholics agree with us. And, that's interesting. But I said, we need to go there, right? Like we need to like actually spend time there. I was very grateful to EWTN to send me to Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Cameroon, and Uganda. So it was
How
really
long were you there?
I was there like 3.5 weeks. It was a
Um,
long,
that's a lot.
yeah, it
In a
was
short
wild.
amount of time.
Yeah, it was. It was maybe too much because
Yeah.
you kind of you're taking in so much every day, and
Yeah.
maybe my writing output. I didn't write as much as I could have, but I learned just an immense amount about the opportunities, but the challenges in Africa. Because I think it is easy to look at videos of like, wow, the churches are full in Africa, but Africa. At the start of the 20th century, there were less than 2 million Catholics on the whole continent, and there are 250 million now, right? So you talk about exponential explosion. But I think there's still challenges related to catechesis, right? So you might have people going to Mass, but then they're going to like a shaman the next day to have some kind of witchcraft done to heal someone or something like that. So that's on one end. And then you have secularism coming in and smartphones and all of the mixed baggage that they bring. I mean, I remember in Kenya, we were at a diocesan event, and there was kind of like a school next door to it, and we were talking to some of the students there. They're probably like 8 years old, boys, and we said, "Who's your favorite musician?" And they said Cardi B. Right, Cardi B. Hopefully, no one on the SPS podcast is familiar with Cardi B's work, but just kind of like not age
There will
appropriate.
not be a link in the description.
Yeah, yeah,
Cardi B's Spotify.
yeah. Just
profile
take
there.
our word for it. That just kind of shocking though, like the reach and the influence of American culture, for better or for worse, that an 8-year-old boy in Kenya,
Yeah.
like Cardi B, is his go-to.
Yeah, we take that for granted.
Oh
but
my gosh.
it's kind of pervasive.
I mean,
the world
in the
over.
hotels in Nairobi, they have CNN on.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's kind of like, talk about responsibility. Like we have an immense amount of responsibility in this country and our impact on other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And it's what Pope Francis called ideological colonization, like especially when the money we might give to a place in Africa for development comes with strings attached. Well, there are things related to sexuality or abortion that
Sure.
you need to begin to promote in your society in order to get this money. And that was something I saw a lot of too. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of excitement in Africa, huge continent, lots of Catholics, but a lot of challenges too. But I mean, for me, it was seeing how just how pervasive the spiritual sense is among. I don't think this is me like stereotyping, because this is what African cardinals or archbishops would tell me, that there is like a kind of more holistic sense of the spiritual world in everyday African life, an openness to the spiritual, an openness to God. I went, probably one of the greatest things I've done in my life is went to Martyrs Day. So this is in Uganda on, I hope I don't mess the date up, June 4th. So this is St. Charles Lwanga and Companions.
Keep talking. I'll look it up. I'll fact check you.
Matt, please do it as we're going live. You should have been doing it the whole time, but we'll see. June 3rd. That's my final answer.
Final answer.
June 3rd, Charles Lwanga and Companions. These were both Catholic and Anglicans in Uganda in the late 19th century, who basically the king at the time wanted them to engage in sexual debauchery, and they said no, and they were all killed. And that's really kind of seen as like, the martyrs are kind of the lifeblood of the church, and like from that, the church explodes. And so Namugongo, Uganda, is important not just for Ugandan Catholics, but all African Catholics. And there were 4 million people who come there for for Mass on Martyrs Day, and it's like to be among that many people who are, many of them went on pilgrimages to get there, walking months from neighboring countries, sleeping multiple days overnight, like on the grounds of the shrine. And you just kind of think of I don't know if I'll go to Mass this Sunday. Like, I'd have to get up at 9 a.m. or something like that. And, just like the complacency that we can lull ourselves into, and just being inspired by people's love of God and need for God. Karl Marx was saying that religion is the opium of the masses.
Right.
I think it's probably the other way around, that like comfort is like the opium. Like, we lose sight of our need for God, for our creator, for our sustainer. Like, what are we doing? Where do we come from? What are we doing here? And it's easy, in the West to not really think about that, because there's something else to watch on Netflix, or there's another Grubhub, new sandwich at Taco Bell. Taco Bell does fried chicken now. I just saw that.
Of course
chicken.
they do.
Yeah. I mean,
Everyone does
nuggets,
fried chicken.
Yeah.
They're all trying to do each other.
But I mean, yeah, I think, and then maybe one more story to share in the Africa thing, if we have time, is I was.
It was June 3rd, by the way. Good job.
Yes. Okay.
Well done.
That's my confirmation saint too, Charles Luanga. So
is that right?
Yeah. So that was
really.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick him?
I'll
let you tell your other story too, but.
Well, I mean, I picked him. I grew up in rural Minnesota, and I just thought it was so cool that the Catholic Church is universal. And I'm like, this guy was a martyr from Uganda, and that's cool. So I'm going with him.
Yes, sir.
And so it was beautiful to be there. But another kind of inspiring, probably the most inspiring thing from the whole trip, I went to Cameroon. So the reason I went there is because there's an Archbishop, Andrew Nakia of Bamenda, and I had heard him give a press conference where he said, in my diocese, we're having a year of adoration. We're building an adoration chapel in every parish, across the Archdiocese of Bamenda. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. When I'm in Africa, I want to go check that out. And so as I was looking into it, I discovered, I didn't know this before because I'm ignorant, but Cameroon has a civil war right now between English speakers and French speakers, because it was colonized, right? So you have the French colonized part and then the English canonized part. They were unified, after independence, but the French-speaking part is bigger, and it just kind of began to dominate the French speakers, or the English speakers. And so in 2017, a war broke out because the English speakers in Bamenda, that part of the country, were like, we're getting short shrift and, conflict and stuff like that. So it's been ongoing, over 6,000 people killed. And Bamenda is the epicenter of it. Like Bamenda, they have enforced ghost town days that the separatists enforce, meaning they will just say, hey, on Friday, it's ghost town day, which means you can't go to school, you can't do business. If you're out on the streets, we'll kill you. Like,
in their own town.
In their own town. And
like full lockdown.
And they'll do it because they're just trying to like shut down the town so that the government gives into their demands. They have something else they call a liberation tax, like that they'll tell the people of Bamenda, you've got to give us money, you got to support the cause, and if you don't, there'll be consequences. And 10 people were killed a few months before I went there, just dragged down in the street and killed by separatists. So that added a bit of context to this. I was like, I'll do a fun, nice little like Eucharistic adoration story and stuff like that. Look, these Cameroonians they love the Eucharist, they love Jesus.
Yeah.
And they do, and they're doing it in the midst of a civil war in their own backyard.
Yeah.
And like, this isn't I had a guy, like a coworker from Cameroon who was with me, who when we got to Bamenda, he said, I'm just going to stay here all day, like at the Archbishop's residence. I'm like, okay. So then I went around, drove around, like in this Jeep around town and stuff like that. And we got back and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't want to go at all because I was afraid we'd get killed. And I was like, oh, thanks for the heads up. But like, I'm so glad, I just did it. It wasn't that courageous or anything like that. But like the people there who on a ghost town day will like go to their adoration chapel. And they said, I don't care like what happens to me. I need to be with Jesus. Right. Or like a woman who told me her brother had been killed by separatists, right? And like the first place she went was the Adoration Chapel, right? Like, and she, didn't harbor this hate in her heart, but was able to go to Jesus and trust her brother's life to him. And And I mean, that kind of stuff, yeah, like it inspired me. And I hope writing stories like that, like going back to John Henry Newman's point, like hearing witnesses, right? Like I think is hopefully inspiring to other people. And we have something to learn from each other. I think in Catholic journalism, there's people intrigue Vatican stuff and all that, but I do think a huge part of what we're supposed to be doing is sharing how the Holy Spirit is working in one part of the church, because that might inspire someone else in another part of the church, right? And like showing that there's life, showing that there's creativity. And so the ability to do that in two very different contexts in Germany, and then in these 5 African countries, was a real gift and inspiration, and was good not just for my career, but for my own faith, and so I'm grateful for it. Yeah.
Hello, thanks for watching this video. I'm Father Brian Gross, Director of Pastoral Formation at the Saint Paul Seminary in Saint Paul, Minnesota. What we do here at the seminary is form men to be joyful, holy Catholic priests for you and for your family. The church is very clear. Forming a man to be a priest is the most important work that the church does, because you need to receive the Eucharist, you need to have your confession heard, you need the good counsel and the holy example of good and holy priests. Here, the faculty and staff at the seminary seek every day to make sure that these men who are ordained priests are as good, holy, healthy, happy as they possibly can. Please donate to the St. Paul Seminary so that the work we do can continue for years to come. You'll find a link in the description. God bless you. Be assured of our prayers.
Was that the most challenging story you've ever had to cover, the Cameroon piece, or is there another really challenging story that kind of
Challenging
sticks
story.
out?
Challenging story that sticks out. I think it was challenging in the sense that I was in a city that had like police lockdown, basically, like military checkpoints all over and stuff like that. But I think it was easy in the sense that, oh, this is such a compelling story. And like, like you don't have to fish too hard when you're interviewing someone to get them to say something interesting, right?
Sure.
Like, because they're seeking out adoration, in spite of the threat of death around them. I think, so that one maybe by comparison was easy. I think the challenges are these theological disputes in the church, right? I think because you want to be fair and you want to be accurate. And I think something that frustrates me a lot is in Catholic journalism, it's just really easy to write about issues happening, those hot button issues, right? But to write them as if they're just a bill that Congress is considering, right? And so I think like to take the time and to try to provide more context, but also if there are, we have, at the Register, we have sort of editorial commitments. Like we treat the catechism basically as this is like our bread and butter, right? And so if there's something that kind of, seems to go against that or something like that, right? Like we're like, well, how do we cover this? Like, would at least someone who holds this view recognize their position when we describe it, right? And so I think that's something I think that is a little more nuanced, a little more delicate, a little more challenging, like in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. How'd you get into this line of work? You've touched on it a little bit, but
Oh, really? I mean, yeah. I think this story. I think like discernment, like sometimes it's like you're discerning and you're like, that up ahead is what I should go for. And sometimes it's like you find yourself.
If only.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I guess for those lucky few, but oftentimes it's much more responding to reality as it is around you. Like God calls us, like right now he's calling us to do something, right? And so I left seminary in 2020 and COVID time, actually. So I actually had an interest in going into sort of higher ed type stuff, but because of the lockdowns and stuff, there wasn't much happening there. I'd worked with the Register before, and so they wanted me to kind of come on in a role. And, there are times when I like academic stuff. I like going slow and deeper, right? That's kind of my instinct, I think, in a lot of ways. And news is a lot quicker. and it can be that can be frustrating at times. But I've been encouraged by some professors, old professors of mine at the seminary, and other people that there actually is a value to someone who has some theological formation, like playing this role, like trying to cover the what's the developments or what's happening in the life of the church, but attempting to bring that perspective to bear. And I think there are times when I feel deeply unworthy or ill-prepared even for that, right? But I think, in fact, like discernment also is trusting that God's led you somewhere for a reason, and that, the experiences you had in life, including my 2 years as a pre-theologian at SPS, and then the MAT program that I'm still in right now, is part of that preparation, right, to do this work. So I love our Catholic faith, and I love communicating about it and applying it to challenges in the world and things like that. And so whether you're doing that as a theologian or as a journalist, I see a continuity, between the two.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. You mentioned your time in seminary. How did that kind of form you for the rest of your life? And talk about that process too. Obviously we don't need every gory detail, but just that process of discerning out. There is, I think, still today a stigma around discerning out of seminary. But praise God that you took the challenge, went for it, and ended up where you're at. What was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, raised Catholic, went to Mass on Sunday. In college, I had what I would call an intellectual conversion. I'm like, this isn't just something I do with my family on the weekends, but this is actually true. And it's it explains everything, all of reality. And but I'd say in my mid-20s, really during the time I was doing a master's in Catholic studies here at St. Thomas, I'd say the more personal, spiritual side of it kind of just kind of deepened in a way. And so, in the context of prayer, the idea that God loves me, or the reality that God loves me, goes from just being an idea, right? Oh yeah, check the box, I know that's true, to something that on almost a more experiential level have become convicted of, right? And so in that context, I began to pray a lot more, adoration a lot, and I just had a desire to kind of make of myself a gift, right, to Christ, to the church. And so I think at the time, there was an idea that I had, in order for something to truly be selfless and truly be loving, it has to be something that you wouldn't otherwise do, if that makes sense. And so even at the time, I had thought about religious life a little bit. The Benedictines down at Benedictine College, I like community. I like praying.
Ravens.
Go Ravens. Is that?
It's my
Oh, yeah. Look at the shirt.
Yeah. I didn't plan that out. But
What is the Fly Ravens Fly? Or is there, what's the?
Oh, you want me to sing the whole fight song?
That's
not going to happen. Yeah, you caw.
Caw?
Yeah, there's a tradition where I actually have mine at my desk, so does the rector of the St. Paul Seminary,
that's right.
Father Joseph Taphorn. You have this beanie. It's this hat. It kind of looks like a yarmulke.
Oh, wow.
Benedictine College on it, and you get that during freshman orientation, okay?
You can't lose that over your 4 years.
Well, I suppose you could lose it after the first week, because the first week is when you're required to wear it or you get publicly shamed.
Really?
The idea is running around Atchison, Kansas, small town near Kansas City. And the idea is you wear the beanie around town during that orientation week, and if an upperclassman pulls it off your head, you have to find the highest point in the room. So I would probably stand up here on this table, and then you go caw, caw, caw.
Oh my gosh. That's some good old-fashioned hazing.
I hope they still do that. I hope that hasn't.
I think some hazing is bad, and it's good that we're kind of attentive to these things, but I think some of it's just good.
It's pretty healthy hazing.
Yeah, healthy hazing. And
Ravens fly high.
The Ravens have I know it's tangent, a bit of a monopoly on SPS right now. I mean, the past two are the interim rector,
Bishop Cousins, also a Raven. There's a lot of great Benedictine ties, and it's cool to be part of one of these schools. You're a Notre Dame guy, right? And so there's good things happening. Yeah, places as large as Notre Dame is kind of small and self-contained as Benedictine.
Yeah, there's good stuff happening.
To go there for sure.
And so the monks there, big fans of the monks.
Yeah.
Brother Levin, shout out if he's around. But
Brother Levin.
So I was interested, I'm like, but I'm like, you know what? No, in order to be truly selfless and truly loving, I have to do something in a way that on a natural level I don't know if I would like doing. And
Yeah.
so I think I like diocesan life, and a parish priest was kind of sort of what rose, up, and I pursued it. And the whole way I was like, I'm here to respond to a call to discern, right? To test that, to be open. And so for me, during my 3 years in seminary, I think it was as I came to greater self-knowledge about myself, and also even a more purified sense of what selflessness is and love is. I think of, when Christ says that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it will not bear fruit. And I think something that kind of came clear to me is like, yes, death to self, but that grain of wheat, there's a certain soil that it's meant to fall into and die and grow and flourish. And same for me. So how God made me, my gifts, my dispositions, all that kind of stuff is part of my self-gift, right? And so as that kind of entered into my process of discernment more, I think, it became clear to me that if I was called to consecrated life, community would be essential to that. And there's so many great communal things in the diocesan priesthood, especially, I think, here in the Twin Cities, Companions of Christ. But I just discerned that I needed to kind of take a step back from the process to be open to that, to see if something like religious life, if kind of was more of the option. And I did that too. I mean, I even lived with, after leaving seminary, I lived with priests for a time. But yeah, I felt like I had entered into that and given myself to it and received so much from it in my learning how to pray. I mean, academically, I love theology. The best time of being a student in my life was when I was in seminary, not in undergrad, because I was actually there to learn, right? And it's all about God, right? And so it's both relational and intellectual at the same time. And the relationships, I was just over at SPS today, and I just stopped to talk to someone 10 times, 10 different people, because old professors or priest formators, and just, Paul Ruff, right? Just everyone, who, and I told Paul Ruff, that some nugget that he gave during formation day, my first year of Theo 1, pre-Theo, 1, is something I just brought up with my fiance when we were talking about how to, a call within a call. And, I'm preparing for marriage now.
Yeah, we totally buried the lead. Congratulations, by the way.
Well, thank you.
When's the wedding? Is this summer?
June 28th.
Let's go.
Yeah, come.
You didn't hesitate on that date.
What do you mean? Oh, no, yeah.
That's good.
I better know that
You're
one.
well trained by now.
I better know that one.
Yeah.
Yes, well trained. And yeah, grateful for that, and the kind of the sense of peace and confidence in that vocation. But it's amazing how, Paul Ruff and this nugget he gave about St. John Vianney, trying to discern a call within a call, is now something that I can apply in this area of my life as well. And I'm just incredibly grateful for my time in seminary, not a second of it wasted or anything like that.
I hear a lot of freedom in that story too. You're able to freely discern and go through the process. And it's good for young men to know, going to seminary does not mean you're committing to the priesthood, the diaconate, any of those things. It is a process that you're guided through.
Yeah, and I think I will say this, Father Taphorn, I know something he's brought to SPS is when a man discerns out, and I had gone on to theology somewhere else, so I wasn't at SPS at the time. But I know when guys leave formation, he gives them an opportunity to share with their brothers, right? How God's working in their life and what the fruit of their discernment has been, because I think if we look at that as a failure, then I think it's well, who's really in charge here? Is God in charge, or are we just sort of forcing people, to go through to ordination? And I don't know if that's a recipe for health all the time, or good priesthoods. But I think so. There's a healthy balance there between encouraging men to give of themselves, but also an openness to what God's calling people to do. And I think I think that allows us to tell people hey, come and see. That's what seminary is about. Yeah. Come and see. Just as Christ said, to the apostles, you're intrigued by me. Well, come and spend time with me, right? And I think things like the propaedeutic year are a really good step in that direction. That there's this entry before, you get overthinking, like, what vestments will I wear when I'm ordained or something like that. It's like, no, like let's wait a second before we think of all those particulars and make sure that we're entering, into relationship with Christ and working on our human formation. And I think that's like a beautiful opportunity that's going to be fruitful for a man, whether he goes on to be ordained or not. The formation throughout. So I definitely, anyone out there thinking about it, if you're doing it for the Lord and you have a sense that he wants you to discern, you go for it. You can't lose, I think.
Words to live by.
Mm.
Has the vice president tweeted at you recently, or was that just a one-time thing?
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's sneaking up on here.
For those who don't know what we're talking about, maybe you can, share the story from the beginning. But that was pretty crazy seeing that come across the timelines.
This is like a couple months ago. Yeah, it was. Yeah, a couple months ago, I wake up and I didn't check Twitter until like 10 a.m. that day, or X, whatever they call it now.
Whatever it's called now. Yeah.
And I noticed I had like 20 notifications or something, which was like, oh, that happens sometimes. And
you're pretty active on there. It's kind of part of the game.
Yeah. It comes with the territory. People trolling me or critiquing me.
Talk about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was I had commented the other day. Vice President J.D. Vance had been in Paris and he had spoken at a tech summit, and he had talked about how we need to be all in on AI. We need to be like, not holding back, not cautious. We need to be just diving into it. And I had, J.D. Vance is just a fascinating figure to me. Because he's a Catholic convert. He's
got an incredible story.
He does, and he's been associated with like a very particular kind of niche of sort of Catholic political thought, which is really Professor Patrick Deneen at Notre Dame, what we might call post-liberal Catholicism, which is a whole.
Yeah,
whole podcast.
Some great stuff on that. That's very super interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And he's talking about unregulated AI, and I'm like, how does that fit into, this post-liberal Catholic thing? Like I thought Vance was going to be the counter to Elon Musk's sort of libertarian tech bro thing, but now, so I just kind of shared some thoughts like that. I didn't tweet at J.D. Vance. I didn't put his handle in. He doesn't follow me, anything like that. So the next morning I wake up, 10 a.m. I got these notifications. I'm looking through them. I see stuff like, good point, Mr. Vice President, or like, exactly right, J.D. Vance. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then I click to the tweet that they're all referring to, and it's like a 5-paragraph tweet from an account with a blue check mark next to it that says J.D. Vance. And I'm like, what is going on here? So my first thought was like, oh no, what did he say? Like, because he can be a little toasty, a little aggressive, a little bellicose.
Oh, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of politicians previously maybe wouldn't engage on these platforms at all.
Yeah.
It's more and more common, like, they'll come after you.
Yeah.
It's going to be to their advantage.
Exactly.
Audience, so.
But he didn't come at me at all. He said, he had some thoughts, right? And he said, I'm going to say more about this later, but what I want to say right now is, the civil war between the tech bros and the conservative populists and the Trump administration is overblown, even though there are differences. And what I want to say about AI is these points, like, and I was just like, what is going on? I was like, wait, what? And like the crazy things are that I didn't tweet at him. Like I didn't mention him.
Right.
He doesn't follow me. Right. Like, why would he? Right. And when he responded to this tweet, it had been seen by 1,000 people or less. So it was not like something that had gone viral or anything like that. So that was peculiar. And these internet sleuths have this theory that he has a burner account or an alt, like, and they had this before this interaction with me, and they know what that account is, so that this is something he can check, kind of look at what's going on Twitter without, his name being connected to that profile. Sure. And that account follows me. So I don't know. It was surreal. I was kind of like, I hope there's not like a drone above my apartment right now.
Not one that you could see.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They're way up there, and but it was peculiar. It was bizarre. I mean, even the sentence, right? Like the vice president of the United States tweeted at me.
Yeah.
Is just a strange thing to say, right? Like
Not many people can say that.
No, and it wouldn't have made sense like 10 years ago. It's like, what do those words mean? He tweeted at you, like,
yeah,
yeah. But I think to me, it was I think again, Catholic journalism and bringing some of the theological formation I've had at SPS to bear is, yeah, like asking questions about what does it mean to be Catholic and American, like in terms of our engagement in the public square, in terms of governance, like what are the pros and cons of a liberal democracy? Not that I'm like a monarchist or anything like that, but like we talked about the church. We're in this moment of flux. I think in this country, it's fair to say.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And politics get conflated with religion all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we look at religion now through this political lens, which I think is probably not healthy.
No, it's not healthy. I think it's, I mean, it is peculiar how, I think, some people might have something in their religious life. The reason they're doing it might be political, like in some way. And then like, religion becomes a political football, or it can just be appropriated and used for political purposes, which is of course a horrible scenario. But yeah, people are looking for some kind of identity. We have it's such a moment of flux. Like, where is there stable ground to stand on? So we have this interesting moment where people are searching for that identity in all kinds of different places, whether it's political, whether it's sexual or something like that. So a lot out there. I think not to be overly pious or spiritual, but like I think it's really liberating to like the church is teaching that your first identity, first and foremost, is you're a beloved son or daughter of God. Like you come from God. You are created by God. You have a purpose. You have a mission. It's not all on you to come up with your identity, right? Or to figure out what am I supposed to do, right? Which is a recipe for all kinds of angst, but to accept that I'm made, right? Like, and I am part of a bigger story. Like, I don't have to expend all this energy and anguish creating myself. Like that statue, there's this sculpture over down on St. Anthony, Maine, near like the Stone Arch Bridge in Minneapolis. This guy like chiseling himself like out of a block of marble, which is kind of looks cool, but it's kind of like, it's like the self-made man is the idea. And that's not who we are, thankfully, right? Like we don't just create ourselves out of nothing. Like we have an identity that's given to us, and that's got to be the kind of foundation from which we step into anything, right? Like politics or whatever. And so, that's, I think that's what the church has to offer.
Yeah, amen. You're close to completing your master's too, so a lot of big changes in your life. You've touched on a lot, but how has that master's that you're getting from the seminary impacted your work, everyday life, and how do you plan to use the learnings from that moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been indispensable. I mean, even independent of my journalism career, I really do think that I know not everyone, including some former classmates in seminary, feel this way, but I mean, to me, theology, like you're really looking at God and everything through the lens of God. And so it really is like understanding yourself, understanding, the one you love or the one you're made for, basically better. And so personally, I think it's extremely edifying in its own right. And then, covering the church, it's indispensable, especially in this media environment that you've identified, like all these pitfalls and these shortcuts and these superficialities. Like, I engage in all that stuff too. Like I step in those pitfalls sometimes, but I know I hopefully do it less, because of the theological formation I've received from this degree and from my seminary studies. Just to be able to hopefully have received a little bit more, like a deeper understanding of what is the church, like what is morality, who is God, the sacraments, like all these things that then you have to write about in a much kind of quicker environment. So it's been, I mean, I think I think there are probably a lot of other journalists who are faster than me, and things like that. But I think I know some people have told me that they appreciate that kind of being able to bring the theological side to bear a little bit more, on the life of the church and what's happening. So, I mean, it's been a real game changer for me. And like I said, to be able to, with Father Pietro, to do an independent study on tradition. What do we mean when we say capital T tradition versus little t traditions? Like, what does that mean? Where does that come from? How does that help us understand what can change, what can't change? Or with Dr. Stevenson looking at synodality, right? Like the foundational text for that theology, the disputes that there might be on some of those foundational issues, and then how that plays into the synod on synodality and like the different perspectives there, was really indispensable to helping me cover that and all these different developments in hopefully a way that's edifying for other people.
It's beautiful. Last one, and we'll get you out of here, especially with the front row seat that you have to so many things going on in the church and the world. What are just some of the top reasons for hope that you see, or things that inspire you right now?
Yeah, I mean, the top reasons for hope are that it's ironic because, like, even as all these challenges, right, in the church, in society, like in the world, right, things are chaotic. Things are in flux. Things are being shaken up, and perhaps we need that kind of agitation, take us out of our comfort zone a little bit to hopefully search for something with more stability, an ultimate kind of stability than our own, anything we as an individual or as a society can concoct. And so I think we see that. I mean, like this year at Easter, all the news is downward trends religiously, right? Mass attendance, affiliation, all these things. And I don't want to overread into a bunch of anecdotes because, as someone once told me, the plural of anecdote is not data, but
that's good.
It is good. That's Father Bill McCormick.
That's got to be on a T-shirt line in Silicon Valley somewhere.
Yeah. It was good. He was a Jesuit political theorist, so he had some good lines. Yeah. But but like this year at Easter, we heard stories like almost spontaneously. It's not like anyone was making this up, but like France, England, Canada, the U.S., like more adults converting, coming into the Catholic Church than ever before. And I think we really are in a crazy moment in history, I think. And it's very just inspiring to see that in the midst of that, people find truth and hope and love, like in the church that Christ established. And I think for us who have been, cradle Catholics or whatever our story is, however long we've been in, like the zeal of a convert, or even just any brother and sister in the church we have, when they talk about how God's moved in their life, it's like a reminder, oh, God's in my life too, and maybe I need to be more attentive to that, or maybe I need to lean into that more. So I think that's a sign of hope. And then finally on campus today, I ran into people like Dominic Miller, Deacon Dominic, Peter Flynn. Dominic's being ordained he's not a deacon yet, right?
He'll be ordained a transitional deacon.
Yes,
God
and guys like that, I know them a little bit, play basketball with them, and it's just it's very inspiring to see people respond to what God's called them to do, and to have a servant's heart, and to have an outlook of love, right? And that's something, even if we're not called to be priests or religious or whatever, like that's something we're all called to do as well. So I think that's a source of inspiration and hope as well.
So good. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your work that you're doing for the church. Good luck as it moves forward. Congrats on getting married. That's so exciting.
Yeah, that's
all new adventures await now.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Let me know if you're in South Bend.
Sounds good.
Yeah.